Hey there, how you doing? My name's Zoo. Um, so I'm starting this channel because I do have quite the fondness for gardening. It really stemmed from when I was young and my dad would be out in the yard and he'd be doing one thing or another, pulling rocks out of the ground, um, mulching, planting trees, unearthing the trees after he planted them because he got tired of them. I always got mad at him for that. But living in Pennsylvania, we had the four seasons, obviously, and when spring came along, I was always looking forward to my dad going out there and trying new things. I actually helped him install a pond that it was a small one. It had a waterfall on it, but uh, we did a lot of gardening around the pond. We were always happy when uh, frogs and such came around and snakes came around and made their homes around the pond. Um, so that was something I really looked forward to when I was young, was the gardening. I mean, he had a sizable house, probably about an acre and a half, so it was a lot of room to plant trees and cultivate his grass and take care of things in a way that most people probably wouldn't. When it comes to gardening, most people are like, oh, I'll just hire a landscaper and oh, sorry about that, hire a landscaper, and then all of a sudden, they have some sort of awesome gardenscape that they had nothing to do with. So I don't know, you really can't be as proud as um a garden or your curbside appeal, in my opinion. If you don't do it yourself and you have somebody else doing it, sure, it looks nice, but you don't have that sense of accomplishment. So the reason I started this channel is because I wanted to get a little bit more, explore a little bit more into the different ways that you can enhance your garden and the different ways that you can um, accent things outside, be it through different garden structures, the way you can creatively make your vegetable gardens, um, maybe drawing upon some of the things that my mom still does to this day. God bless her soul. Still does to this day. She does a lot of herbs, spices, and she's got to have about 20 different spices in the garden out back, and it's everywhere. But she uses it in her cooking like almost every single day in her salad soups, you name it. She uses it, and it's kind of a wonder to me how somebody could have used their knowledge or have accumulated the kind of knowledge that you would need to make the food that tasty from the herbs and spices that are in your garden. It was really a wonder. Um, Part of the reason also that I'm talking uh, or that I'm making this video is because I wanted to talk about my own experience when I bought a house with my wife over in Audubon, Pennsylvania. I too then wanted to have that same passion. I struggled a little bit because there was a lot of wildlife in the area and I always ate everything. So hostas were always eating all of my like leafy, like large leafy plants were always consumed by just numerous deer. So they were everywhere. And I got really frustrated and I needed to like come up with some sort of way, like a build a fortress or something like that around various garden elements. So I had a few years of success, but ultimately, if it wasn't the deer, it was something else. It was maybe a groundhog or a rabbit or the voles, which in my last year over at Audubon, we had an insane infestation of voles in the backyard. And so they dig tunnels throughout the entire yard and and basically just destroy your yard, destroy your grass, and then find their way into your garden, eat the roots, and basically deflate you to a point where I don't think you want to ever do another garden ever again, because you've tried so many times, you've curtailed the deer, and then other vermin come around and then they destroy your psyche when it comes to gardening. So I had some success. Most of the time I was decimated by the wildlife, and for me it was a losing battle, but I still enjoyed it. I ended up building a fence, a plastic fence around this 50-gallon pond that I had the 2 years before we moved out of Audubon. And that was fun. The pond plants were really, really fun. It was nice to see them grow fast in the summertime. You would be surprised at how fast water lettuce grows, the hyacinths, the lily pads, and any kind of plant that is designed to be around a wet environment. It does grow exceedingly fast, and almost so fast that you don't know what to do with it. It just grows and grows and grows. Like you'll take out 3, 4 handfuls of the water lettuce, and then like a week later, it's all back and then some. So it's good and bad, because I did have aquatic life in the pond, the fish. So I don't know how hard it got for them to swim around because of all the roots. The root structure was just insane. So I didn't want them to get stuck. So that was a little bit of a struggle. I tried a hydroponic structure, something that I'd like to talk about in this channel later on. Hydroponics was not easy. I thought I could just dive right into it without knowing anything. I saw a couple of YouTube videos, and I thought maybe this is something that I could do. So I got some 6 or 8 inch PVC, drilled some holes, and then planted. And then I did some sort of circular system where I would take water from the pond, uh, go through the PVC, come back to the pond, and that didn't work at all. Yeah, my hydroponic was a big fail, so that's something I'm going to try to also learn about throughout this channel. But in Audubon, I all right, so let me start over with this story, because this is really one of the main reasons why I wanted to talk to you guys about this. So there was this plant that my dad and I, when I was younger, we would see it in the cornfields, or we would see it on the side of the road. And it was this beautiful, beautiful flower, and it was hardy. And in the hottest of weather, we would have 10, 15, 20 straight days of 90 plus degree weather. And everything would go brown except this plant. And it would have these big, beautiful stalks of purple flowers. They'd be growing basically in the pavement if it could, like any crack between the curb and the blacktop. There were these plants growing, and my dad always joked that he wanted to make a garden of these, but we never really got around to it. So we would drive by and we would ooh and ah at these flowers when everything else was dry or burnt, dry, brown. And I was like, oh, one day maybe I'll put it in my garden. But when I got my own house, one day my dad comes over and he has one of these plants in his hand. He's like, I got one for you. And I go, cool. All right. I guess I'll plant it in the garden. I'll plant it right in the middle. There's a ditch, and it always had water in it, because it was a ditch that didn't really drain very well between my yard and the neighbor's yard. And I thought, all right, well, it doesn't really need that much water anyways, but when it does rain, it will get water. So I planted it in there. It was one stalk, and it grew, and it was hardy. The first year it didn't really do that much. It flowered. Maybe there was a few stalks there that flowered, and then they made hundreds of seeds. Like the The flowers drop. I guess it's a perennial. And I'm not telling you the name of the flower just yet because I didn't know the name of the flower at the time, and neither did my dad. And we just knew it was like a wildflower that was really cool. So they dropped all these seeds, and then the next year, there had to have been like 100 plants, all the same type. And I'm like, holy crap. You know, all of a sudden there was this huge like spot, probably I would say a 10 foot by 10 foot area of this stalky, I guess weed-like wildflower that somewhere mid-season would just grow these beautiful purple stalky flowers. And then I had to know what the name of this thing was. Like I couldn't just sit back and not know. So I did some research, and this is before I knew that you could just take a picture of a flower and put it in Google. You know, you could take a snapshot of it, and then Google would tell you what it was. I had no idea that that actually existed at the time, and it was about, I don't know, I would say 5 or 6 years ago. And I didn't know that you could do image searches. I don't even know if you would have been able to do it back then. I know they made a lot of progress when it comes to image searching in Google. I just did it actually the other day. I was looking. I wanted to sell something on Mercari, and lo and behold, it was like just this random plate that my wife owns, and she wanted to get rid of it actually, and it brought up like 10 exact images that were of the same exact plate. It was like China, had the same inscription, the same design, and it came up, and I'm like, here you go. And I went on like eBay and got like description, and it was the perfect description for the item that we wanted to sell. I didn't have that for this plant though. So the plant, I just searched and searched and searched for the only thing that I could really, the keywords that I could put in were stalky, wild, purple flower, beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And I came up with a bunch of results, and I'm like, well, which one looked, there were so many that looked like it that were plants that people would actually buy at like a garden center, you know, like Lowe's Garden Center or something like that, or your local nursery. And I just couldn't find it until I came across one that looked similar to it, and I clicked on it, and it said, as a matter of fact, you know what? Now let me rewind just a little bit because I didn't know the name of it yet until a specific thing happened to the plant itself. I didn't know the name of the plant. Um, so like yeah, rewinding a little bit, like if you remember how I said there was like a lot of deer and all these other like this wildlife around my house. So I was proud of this plant. It was in the ditch. I was proud of it because it was like coming back like wildfire, and it it started growing really really fast, and the deer came around and started eating it. And then I got upset again because I'm like, oh great, just another plant that the deer love. So I got this solution called deer off. So deer off, if you don't know what that is, it's just like this concoction of like mint and some other like other things that deer find offensive in a solution, like a concentrated solution. So I would spray it on this plant whenever I had a chance, but the rain would wash it off, and I would have to go out there and spray it again. So you had to be kind of disciplined. So whenever I forgot, in like a few days would go by, the deer would come around and they would start eating my plant again. So I'm like, all right, well, I don't know what to do here. I'll just put like a small like wire fence around it, which I did, and I think that kept deer at bay. And up for a while until it grew so tall that it would actually go over the fence, and they would eat all the new growth again. So they would stymie the growth of my plant. But at least I got some flowers out of it. The flowers were beautiful. So there came a point in time where I don't think the deer really liked the older growth. So once the older growth came in and established itself, the deer didn't like it. So they only ate the very newest leaves that emerged at the tip of the plant. So if you can imagine the stalk, and the very tippy tip of it was new growth, like bright green growth that obviously the deer found to be very tasty. But I kept them at bay for a while. But then I noticed one day I came out and there was an infestation of beetles on the plant. So I'm like, great. If it's not the deer, now it's beetles. I I put a few in my hand and I looked at them and I'm like, this is nothing like I've ever seen before. It was a species of beetles that I had no idea what it was. And it just seemed rare. It was the very first time that I had ever seen anything like this in my life. I've been on this earth for several decades and I'm like, what the heck is this? Usually you can see a beetle that you're familiar with in the area and you'd be like, oh, I know what that is. It's like I don't know. Let's see, what kind of beetles are there around here? Like the Japanese beetle. The Japanese beetle is one, or the weevils. You had other kinds of black beetles around that you'd be like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. Stink bugs, I guess they're kind of beetles, the dung beetles. But this one, it was like a really unique looking beetle. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't know the name of the plant. I don't know the name of this beetle. Now I have to know, I have to look up as to why this beetle is absolutely decimating my plants. And it was hundreds, if not thousands of beetles that were on this plant. I actually ended up going to Lowe's and picking up some insecticide, which I don't like to do. It's like the last time I ever picked up anything chemical wise. When you're younger, you don't really realize that all this stuff is not good for the environment, especially for you health wise. I don't think you should be using that stuff. Causes cancer, I guess. If you breathe too much of it in, especially all those products that they give you over at the garden centers, or the irresponsible ones, in my opinion, which is Home Depot and Lowe's. Their garden centers, they have like stacks and stacks of weed killer insecticide too. But I got it anyways because I was pissed. I was really, really mad that I had just gotten the deer to stop eating my plant, and now there's this species of beetles I've never seen before. So I couldn't, even though I sprayed the insecticide on it, that would wash off and the beetles would come back. And that was just too much. Like I couldn't deal with that. So that is when I started to do the search for both the flower and now the beetle. Like I had to look at various pictures of beetles where I would try to describe the beetle, and all of these beetles would come up and I would call it a rare beetle. It's like brown with some black stripes on it, some horizontal stripes or something like that. They were maybe the size of, I don't know, maybe a pea, I guess. So the beetle, I finally found a beetle that looked very, very similar to it. And it actually ended up being the beetle because I took a picture of the ones that were on the plant, and as hard as it was to figure out what kind of plant that was, because there's so many different kinds of species of wildflowers and domesticated flowers that look a lot like the one that I had in my garden. Uh, this beetle was one of a kind. So when I found this beetle, I knew exactly that I found it on, it was the one that was on my plant. And it was called Galarusella or something like that. So the Galarusella beetle, and there's only one reason for the Galarusella beetle to have existed, is because it was a genetically engineered beetle, and it was genetically engineered to eat the plant that was in my garden. I'm like, all right. So I read up on this beetle. It was genetically engineered to basically rid the environment, rid wetlands of this flower, this wild flower. And now, drum roll, the flower itself is called purple loosestrife. So sorry for that long-winded story, but it's I felt like I had to kind of like build it up a little bit, even though I know I'm not the most exciting guy in the world, but I wanted to build it up just a little bit because it took me probably 6 months just to figure out like what this stupid plant was. And I only found out what it was because of the beetle. So now we have this plant called the purple loosestrife. I look it up and I'm like, well, what is so bad about the purple loosestrife that they would have to genetically engineer a beetle to eat it and destroy it? And then, it opened up a whole new, just a litany of things that I could learn about this plant that now makes it the villain of the story. So the purple loosestrife is an invasive species, and it's not native to the United States. I don't think it's actually it was probably brought over into like container ships or shipped over accidentally. I mean, they make thousands upon thousands of seeds. Now think of the thousands of seeds that came from one stalk. Now look at the multiple stalks that grew from that one stalk, and now you're talking about tens, if not hundreds of thousands of seeds coming from these flowers. So let me just show you really quick. I'm gonna share my screen and I'm gonna show you what the purple loosestrife actually looks like. Let's see if I can find a. Here's an article here. It says purple loosestrife, Lythrum salicaria, good plant or bad weed. Let's take a look at it. And here we go. All right, let me share my screen really quick. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm going to share this. Okay. So here we go. Here we go. I have the purple loosestrife here. And we're just going to go down to, that's funny. First article that I find is how to identify the purple loosestrife. Well, I know how I identified it. Find out the kind of beetle that eats it first, and then identify it. But I mean, if you look at the flower, it looks a lot like flowers that you might have had in your garden at one point, or the other things that you've seen out in the wild. It looks very similar to other things, like maybe a lilac or something like that. But here, hold on a second, my eyes can't see that. So here, the purple loosestrife is an erect plant with thick, upright stems and roots. The tall plant can reach 2 meters, 6 feet in height, and 1 meter, 3 feet in width. The many tall stems are covered with fine hairs. On the underside of the stem are conspicuous bright purple flower spikes hanging down throughout the lower parts of the stem. These impressive spikes of magenta flowers bear clusters of flowers grouped in umbrella-like inflorescences. Well, that's a cool word. The flower of purple loosestrife from dense strands and grow either individually or in groups of 2 or 3. The flowers have 5 petals fused together into a bell shape that varies in color from purple, red, orange, or pink. These are pretty bright compared to the ones that I had in my garden. But you can see the allure, right? The allure of these flowers was too much for my dad or I to bear. So we obviously fell victim to the invasive species of the loosestrife. Um, but the beetle, I don't know how the beetle got to my yard. That in and of itself is kind of a mystery to me. Is if they were genetically engineered, how did they actually get to that plant? So from where did they come? You know, because they were actually genetically engineered to fight the purple loosestrife in the wetlands. So I know there's different departments, different governmental agencies that have endorsed these projects to rid wetlands of the purple loosestrife. And I've actually even seen a few videos on that. So where do you find the purple loosestrife? It can be found in wet habitats such as lakes, rivers, bogs, wetlands, and wet meadow areas. Flowers are very inconspicuous, but can be seen along roadsides well, there you go, along roadsides where they spread over the ground. So not only do they spread on dry land, they obviously spread in wetlands. It's often found growing in groups on the shoreline of lakes with wet soil, has nutrients available for it to grow. It spreads both vertically and horizontally by seed dispersal and floating submerged seeds into new areas that have moist soil where roots have developed around drainage ditches. I'm like literally uh, describing everything that I did with the plant, a drainage ditch, and I had a drainage ditch between my neighbor. I did not see this article prior to my little story, I swear to God. I don't know what that is. That's an ad. So flowering distribution, purple loosestrife's natural distribution includes Europe, Asia, North America. It is widely distributed in eastern North America, where I live, where it prefers moist soils along watercourses. It has been introduced into South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and many other parts of the world. So it's pretty ubiquitous. Like this plant is kind of like a stalwart. You know, it it can live anywhere, it can survive anywhere. It's kind of probably like the cockroach of plants, where if there was a nuclear explosion or Holocaust, it would still survive. It would be the last plant standing or the first plant to come back. The flowers are pollinated by bees and other long-tongued insects, which is true. I remember seeing butterflies and other insects floating by or munching on the flowers. It flowers from June to August, and during that time, its nectar becomes a valuable food source for insects such as brimstone butterflies, elephant hawk moths. I love the hawk moths. Its seeds are dispersed by flowing water, wind through the underwater vegetation, streams, rivers, and lakes. Is the purple loosestrife poisonous? Purple loosestrife is poisonous to animals and humans. Oh, I didn't know that. It contains alkaloids that prevent the animal's blood cells from absorbing oxygen. Symptoms of poisoning include dizziness, weakness, slow heart rates, difficulty breathing, sometimes death. Oh my goodness, this plant's a lot worse than I thought. Death? Oh my gosh. It's a good thing I didn't give it to my mom for her to put in her salad. Jeez. How much the plant needs to be ingested for poisoning to occur is unclear. However, fresh or wilted leaves or stems typically result in severe illness or death if the animal consumes more than a few kilograms. It's too bad the deer didn't consume that much. Sorry to anybody who likes deers. Is the purple loosestrife invasive? Probably. Purple loosestrife is a highly invasive weed that is harmful to local ecosystems in many countries. Purple loosestrife is now a problem where it has been introduced because it grows quickly and spreads easily through its shoots and are poisonous if ingested. If you see purple loosestrife growing outside your yard or anywhere else for that matter, you should consider removing it to prevent it from spreading. Interesting. Let's see more about the toxicity. Toxic Tuesday is a weekly guide to poison gardens. All right. Oh, no, it's not there. No, it's not there anymore. Thanks, Sam. Let's look for more purple loosestrife stuff. Let's see. Purple loosestrife benefits? People use purple loosestrife as a tea for diarrhea, menstrual problems, and bacterial infections. Purple loosestrife is sometimes applied directly to the affected area for varicose veins, bleeding gums, hemorrhoids, and eczema, but there is no good scientific evidence to support these uses. That was in WebMD. How does it work? Purple loosestrife contains chemicals that might reduce swelling and others that might help fight bacteria in the intestine, but you're not supposed to ingest it because it makes you sick. Wow, conflicting information. Is that it? No, let's look for more. Herb of the week. It's interesting. This is new stuff that I haven't actually even read about. Looks like this guy is potentially a fan of the purple loosestrife. Lythrum salicaria. Underappreciated herb. What? Man, I'd like to get these guys in the same room as the people that want them to be eradicated. It's been villainized with the tag invasive. That label is in general is really problematic for me because plants aren't native to locations. They're native to growing conditions. Oof. This guy's a provocateur. If we change the conditions, the plants will change. A great book on this topic is Where Do Camels Belong by Ken Thompson, in places where the growing conditions are healthy. I have not seen loosestrife become invasive. It stays fairly well balanced, but in unhealthy places, it thrives. Part of the reason is that it's doing a job. Loosestrife is one of our pollution remediator plants. Purple loosestrife can actually remove PCBs from contaminated water and soil. And in fact, they did a great study on the efficacy on the Hudson River with significant success. Plus, loosestrife can absorb excess phosphorus and nitrogen from agriculture runoff as well. That alone is enough to endear purple loosestrife in my mind, but there's so much more to love. Loosestrife has a long history of medicinal use. Even Dioscorides wrote, Dioscorides, he sounds Greek, I guess, wrote about it. And at that time, loosestrife was valued for its astringent qualities, especially for stopping bleeding. In more modern times, Maud Grieve wrote about loosestrife as superior to eyebright for problems in the eyes, and it has a European history for use of everything from diarrhea to typhus to sore throats. Oh, I thought it was supposed to cause diarrhea. We work with loosestrife most commonly as a respiratory plant for winter illness, but also as an antifungal. That action was found quite by coincidence. Actually, we were on a trip somewhere, and my daughter was suffering from athlete's foot. We didn't have a lot of herbs with us, but we did have a tincture that had been marketed as a throat spray with Usnea and Loosestrife. I don't even know what Usnea is. I really need to educate myself on the pronunciations of a lot of these words and actually even just the concept of them. We used that to great success and initially attributed to the Usnea, but later discovered that the Usnea alone had nowhere near the antifungal action that the two together had. We've since combined the two or worked with loosestrife alone for athlete's foot on many occasions, and we keep it on hand always. Loosestrife also figures prominently in our winter syrup. Really? As urban herbalists, and especially with our busy teaching schedule, it's not always easy for us to harvest our own herbs. But every year when the loosestrife is blooming, I head to the river to gather plants for my winter syrup. I always include purple loosestrife, elderberries, goldenrod, and sumac as my base. My mom uses a lot of sumac, coming from our Middle Eastern origin. You know, there's sumac is actually used in a lot of Middle Eastern food for its unique flavor. And then each year I work from there depending on what plants are the strongest and most abundant. Usually that includes boneset, blue vervin, nettle, plantain, yarrow, and catnip at the least. And often I will add it in some ground ivy tincture made early in the year. Ground ivy is another one of the plants that we always harvest fresh, and some fresh baby ginger from one of our local farms as well. Usually when I make tinctures, I tincture everything separately, which makes it easier to use that tincture to formulate in different ways for different people. I found out that I have the problem with the word tincture. But when it comes to winter syrup, I like the tincture, everything together in the same jar, just like cooking. I like the herbs to have a while to get good and friendly. I come home with my basket full of stuff it all together in a very large jar and cover it with vodka. It macerates until the first time someone in the family gets sick, usually a month or two. Then I strain it, and add honey, and it's ready to go. Ideally, the honey is elderberry and loosestrife infused as well. All parts of the syrup are medicine. Interesting. Bees also love loosestrife. It's a pollinator species, and it's not just for honeybees, but for our native pollinators too. Loosestrife has been favored by American beekeepers since the 1800s. And in fact, then it was so common that botanists initially thought it was a native plant. Here in Massachusetts, attempts to eradicate loosestrife have seriously jeopardized bee populations. According to the Middlesex Beekeepers Association, because the pollinators depend on these late season blossoms to make enough food to get through the winter, where they are eradicating loosestrife, no native plants are growing in its place. So the space is being filled with another invasive that doesn't flower. Phragmites. What is that? Phragmitis. Never heard of it. Issues around invasiveness are complicated, but loosestrife is such a plant in service to the soil and the pollinators and even the humans in areas where it is growing in great abundance. We can feel grateful because that means we can harvest abundantly. What's your favorite way to work with loosestrife? Herb of the week. Should I leave a comment? I don't know. I don't work with loosestrife. I thought it was bad, but now I'm not sure. I am not sure if the loosestrife is bad. Let's see. Universities that worked with purple loosestrife. in Pennsylvania. Look at that, where I live. All right, let's see if we're going to get into the beetles. Let's see. Yeah, biological control. How about that? Again, the Galaricella. I can't even pronounce that. Why are there so many tough pronunciations in botany and insectry? Backyard biocontrol, combating purple loosestrife. Purple loosestrife is an aquatic invasive plant species. All right, here we go. It was first discovered in the United States in the 1800s, and by 1938 was found in Minnesota. Purple flowers, 7 feet tall. The other one said 2 meters, 7 feet, and grows in masses, taking over the landscape. So they're painting it in a much darker light, the darker way, such that we now are going to find that they think it is the villain. It has threatened Minnesota waters by disrupting the hydrology of ecosystems, outcompeting native plants, disrupting habitat for native species, and creating dense growths, preventing access to waterways. So this is a different way in which purple loosestrife is bad. So I would think that maybe there are environments where the purple loosestrife should thrive, and then there are some where it probably should be culled a little bit. It is a prohibited, controlled, noxious weed. Ooh, there's a new one. This designation means purple loosestrife must be controlled in some way by landowners to reduce its spread. One method of removal that has grabbed attention in recent years is biological control. And that is what I saw in my garden. Saw biological control, also known as biocontrol, involves introducing other species to combat or eradicate invasive species. In the case of purple loosestrife, the main biocontrol agent being used in Minnesota are the purple loosestrife eating beetles, Galaricella. Purple loosestrife beetles harm the plant with the adults chewing circular holes into the leaves. Yes, I can attest to that. The larvae also eat the growing leaves and shoots of the plant with an action called window painting. The upper leaf layer is removed, creating a see-through window pane in the leaf. Well, I think a lot of bugs do that. With extensive feeding, loosestrife can lose the ability to produce seeds, which slows its spread in the environment. Eventually, repeated heavy feedings can lead to death. Are we supposed to support biocontrol efforts? For master gardeners, master naturalists, or any avid supporter of native plants, helping with local purple loosestrife biocontrol efforts is not complicated. There are many possibilities for participating in invasive species management, even in your backyard. I don't know. I'm thinking about maybe in my new house now where I am, I'm thinking about actually planting purple loosestrife. I haven't seen any around here where I live right now. And to be honest, I don't really see it that much anymore. I don't know. Maybe the Galaricella beetle has actually done its job around here, since I know it exists because I found it. So maybe they're not around anymore. Hmm. Now I'm curious. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more local research to see like if the Galaricella beetle actually eradicated the purple loosestrife around here. The Minnesota DNR extensive resources for conducting biological control projects for purple loosestrife using leaf-eating beetles. First, contact your local invasive species specialist to see if you can start a project or join in on a local effort. Depending on whether you are rearing the beetles or simply collecting and releasing them, different permits may be needed. So it's best to seek out guidance. Geez, this is an entire movement. So I can own the beetles and release them. Unbelievable. Release the Kraken. Collect and move. The Minnesota DNR's Guide to Collecting and Move Methods for Biocontrol. Details. All materials needed for collecting beetles and transporting them to another site. Collecting the beetles is very simple and just requires a site where the beetle populations are established. All you have to do is create a makeshift cage, a soda bottle, go to the purple loosestrife plants, and collect any beetles you find. It's as easy as getting out your waders or boots, heading to your nearest wetland collection site to get started. Tips and tricks. A trick I learned from the experience of catching these beetles is to hold the bottle low on the plant with one hand and use the other to sweep the beetle off the leaf it is occupying. These beetles will fall off the leaves if you disturb them, so have the bottle below to capture them while lightly brushing them to make them fall off the best way to catch them. Finding the tiny beetles on the plant can be tricky, but the top of the plant in between the crevices and new growth leaves and the underside of the leaves are some of their favorite hiding spots. I wonder if they're smart, like the spotted lanternfly around here. I haven't seen those either. I think they have a method of eradicating spotted lanternflies too, with some sort of fungus that was discovered over at Penn State, one of the branch campuses at Penn State. But that's a subject for another day. For this collection and move method, you must collect a great number of beetles to be effective for the release. The Minnesota DNR suggests 1,000 beetles per release site. This is a lot of beetles, but it is a simpler option than rearing a population, especially if you collect it as a group with others. Once you have collected that amount of beetles, you release them at your designated site and let the beetles do the rest. So I'm thinking maybe there might have been a designated site around where I used to live where people release the beetles. I can only hypothesize that might have been the case. You never know. I mean, it could definitely be the case. Rear and release. The Minnesota DNR's Guide to Rearing and Releasing Beetles details the materials needed to successfully for a successful population of beetles of your own. When doing a rear and release project, the permits required are especially important. So close cooperation with your local invasive species specialist is needed. They can guide you to preferred sites for release if you do not have a private one of your own. The setup for rearing the beetles is quite simple and does not require much space. A small backyard setup consisting of a small pool and a few plants with netting can be easily done. The beetles will feed on the plants, and after a month, they will be ready to release. In Le County, the invasive species specialist Holly Bushman created a simple setup utilizing a pool and 3 plants for our rearing project, Purple Loosestrife ecosystem interactions. Introducing the Gallericella beetles to destroy purple loosestrife can be effective, but with anything in nature, other factors will influence their effectiveness. The purple loosestrife plant can host many other species that play a role in the ecosystem. Here we go. These beetles must navigate carefully and avoid becoming prey to another insect or being outcompeted by another. Predatory stink bugs and lady beetles may eat loosestrife beetles, eggs, or larvae. Lady beetles? Why don't we call them ladybugs? There are also other species that will occasionally eat the leaves of purple loosestrife plants, such as certain caterpillars and deer, by the way. I got a big surprise when I went to check on our beetle rearing site in Le County, only to find a gigantic white-lined sphinx moth caterpillar inside of the netting, eating away at purple loosestrife plant. Interesting. It was removed to save the plant for the beetles to feast on, and it was a very unusual incident of ecosystem reactions happening on purple loosestrife. I didn't realize that other species actually ate the purple loosestrife. I thought it was just the beetle and the deer, to tell you the truth. But now I know. Now there's the white-lined sphinx moth caterpillar. Interesting. For any biocontrol project, keep in mind that the ecosystem interactions can occur, but in purple loosestrife's case, are not very concerning, findings of other species can help you further understand biological control. By partnering with your local invasive species specialist, you can easily participate in the statewide efforts to control purple loosestrife in Minnesota's wetlands. Well, I'm in Pennsylvania, so I don't have to worry about Minnesota. Collecting and releasing of or rearing your own population to later release are simple projects that can be undertaken by a dedicated nature lover, master naturalist, or master gardener chapters. These methods won't completely eradicate purple loosestrife, but controlling populations can do a lot of benefit to a wetland. Supporting biological control efforts is a great way to be involved in local invasive species management to rejuvenate your landscape. So I'm conflicted because I know that the plant probably should not be in certain areas, wetlands, so to speak, waterways that could potentially get blocked by the plant. They probably shouldn't be there. But in other cases, maybe where I live now, there really isn't species of plants that are going to be snuffed out by the purple loosestrife because I'm in a, even though there's a state park behind me, I don't, it's a kind of like a sparse type of state park. Like you can walk through it, you're not going to get like stuck with all sorts of plants. It's like a bunch of pine trees, deciduous trees, and unfortunately a lot of trees that are dying right now because of the spotted lanternfly. The tree that the spotted lanternfly was killing was actually the heck was it? Not the oak, ash trees. Yeah, so I have a lot of ash trees in the new house that I just bought with my wife. If you look between my yard and our neighbor's yard, there's a strip of trees there, and there's just a bunch of stalks of ash trees that obviously used to be alive, but we had such an infestation in this area of the spotted lanternfly that they ended up killing a lot of ash tree because it was their favorite food. They would eat the bark of the ash tree and somehow cause some sort of disease that would spread, and then obviously now there's just a bunch of decaying and falling branches, and it's actually a sad sight because ash trees are actually really nice, but all of them that I've seen in this area are actually dead. So I'm thinking about planting. I'm probably going to have some videos on what trees to plant that are like fast growing trees or something that in my case, like I would want to have like say paulownia trees, even though I know paulownias are probably considered invasive too. But I start to wonder what does invasive really mean? Like, is it about the ecosystem in which the the species is growing? Kind of like we just learned, like if I had purple loosestrife in my backyard, for example, I don't think it's going to kill everything. There's other things in my backyard that are quite they grow quite extensively and they're very hardy. There's a lot of like mustard plant or ragweed that's everywhere. I don't know that the purple loosestrife would snuff out ragweed, and I'm sure you've seen ragweed, and it's quite an aggressive species. And it's in my garden right now, actually. I've been working really hard to clean up my beds because this is the first year that I'm living in this new house. I just bought a rancher with my wife, and that's the first year, and it was an utter and complete mess. I wish I would have taken some pictures. I would have actually, it would have actually been good for you to see like um, how much work I actually did to eradicate the grounds or surrounding my house of the mess that the previous owners left behind. And now I kind of have a clean slate. So I'm in the final stages, hopefully before the winter hits us, the final stages of digging up some weeds in the bed, and then I'm going to take some mulch, some free mulch, by the way, and that's actually a story for another day. So if you're going to um, if you ever want free mulch, there's a service called I think it's called leaf drop, or I'm sorry, not leaf drop. Um, I'm gonna have to come back to you on that one. But it's basically a service where you get into a database along with a bunch of arborists, and they connect you with an arborist. And instead of them having to go to a site and drop their mulch off for $10 to $20, because it costs them. So every time they have to go and drop their mulch or their tree shavings, so they grind everything, right? So they take their special machinery and they grind everything to a big truck. And instead of going to the dump site where they have to pay, you're partnered with just any number of arborists in the area, and they come to your house instead. So you take a picture or two, tell them where to put the free mulch, and the only thing that you're going to have to accept is that they're going to give you 20 yards of mulch. Now, if you don't know how much 20 yards of mulch is a lot. It's quite a bit of mulch. Like you're probably talking, if you have a small property, you're definitely talking about 4 seasons worth of mulch. So I saw like a few stories on, oh, it's called leaf drop, I think. Oh, don't quote me on that. I saw some stories of like people actually sharing the mulch with their entire neighborhood because they didn't realize that it was going to be a pile that was taller than them and probably about 15 feet in diameter. So that's what I got. I ended up actually transporting some to my dad at his house, and I have not started to put any in my beds yet because of all the work that I've been doing. So uh, in this case, I'll probably end up putting a little bit more on that, like some little tips and tricks on how to, do some things for free. You're going to save a lot of money. Mulch can be expensive, I guess. I mean, 20 yards, you're going to be paying, $500 for 20 yards of mulch. Now, granted, it's it's um it's not straight from like the nursery, it's from your arborist. So they're grinding things with their machine, and it's going to the back of a truck. So it's raw. It's not like they're filtering out all the, the sticks, and some leaves still come through with it. You're going to get some inconsistency with the mulch, but it smells good. It smells fresh, especially if you have pine. If you get a pine tree, and the reason why I actually found out about this service was because of my friend down in Virginia. He said he uses it, and when he had he specifically requested them to give him pine, which smells absolutely wonderful. So if there's an arborist that just cut down a bunch of pine trees, you're gonna have a very nice smelling garden, and it's gonna smell like pine for a while. And maybe, if the smell goes away, you can get one of those garden weasels and come and just mix it up again for the smell to come back. So, anyways, I know that was a non sequitur. So let's let's see if it has a. Is that a picture of the beetle? Oh yeah, look at that. Those are the larvae. Where's the actual beetle itself? Wait a minute. Oops. Oh no. All right, here we go. Purple Loosestrife beetle picture. There we go. You see that? There we go. So I said horizontal. It's actually vertical stripes. It's a weird looking beetle. Like I said, nothing that I'd actually even seen before. There it is eating the leaves. Here's another picture. For a bigger one. There we go. There's that little fella. So I think that's all I have to say about that. And maybe I'll continue this video. And I have a part 2 or something like that, and I'll merge the videos because I'm just trying to get my channel started and really interested in exploring new ideas, new insights on gardening and plants, herbs, the way that you can again combine the wonders of your garden with garden to table, new ideas for garden structures, like I said, and making sure that you have a sustainable living environment. I even have a cousin who did like an indoor garden, like he did a living wall. So a living wall is something that I'd like to like maybe a series on a living wall. I'd like to investigate that, maybe even do one for myself. Um, I don't know how much my wife would like that, but at least if I can convince her to do it in one room, maybe she'll let me do it. But I have a lot of work to do. The property that I bought is 2 acres, so I am planning on taking full advantage of 2 acres of lawn to grow as many herbs, vegetables, maybe even plant a few fruit trees, get some eastern redbud, paulownia, maybe get what's another really, really nice plant? Obviously, the canna. I like the tropical look of the canna, maybe a banana plant. What's that one ferny tree? There's a ferny tree that I really, really liked. Can't think of the name of it, but think of leaf drop. Leaf drop is something that you should look into. Um, okay. So let me see. Let me stop sharing really quick. Where are we at? Okay. Well, I might continue. I might paste another thing onto this. So I'll be back. Oh, I'm back. Okay, so it wasn't leaf drop. It's called chip drop. And here, actually, I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm going to show you the service. Maybe you'll find it helpful. There we go. Okay, so chip drop. Let's go to their website. It says here, we deliver gardeners. Oh, sorry. We help gardeners get free wood chip mulch deliveries. So I signed up, and they don't give you a time frame. They said it could take up to 6 months to get the mulch, or it could take as little as like 2 weeks. I probably got my chips in about 3 weeks. I was surprised actually. He arrived, and it just so happened that there was somebody in the way in my driveway, and he ended up my wife's here, and he ended up leaving. She called me. She goes, I think he came and left, and I think he left because he couldn't get through. So I quick called him up, and I said, you have to come back. I don't want to have to wait like months for the chips to arrive. And there's two options. You can actually choose to get chips that are pine, only pine. You can choose anything, and then you can actually, there's an option for there's an option for like unclean, I guess, where you're not very picky about how pure it is. So like there can be sticks and all sorts of twigs in there. It's not filtered, but they do have other ones. Like if you're not picky, it probably won't take as long to get the chips. Let me see if I log in. Um, no, don't have a login on this browser, but that's okay. I think you get the idea. I wish I took a picture of the mulch pile before I started giving some of the mulch to my dad, or chips, I guess we call them chips. But he was so happy that I took the chips over there because he didn't have to order it. And if I don't know how much like a mulch bag costs, I think it's probably a good 40 to 50 bucks for just a mulch bag. And a mulch bag is not nearly 1 yard of mulch. It would probably take about, I would say, 3 or 4 bags to make a yard of mulch, which let's just conservatively say that's about, let's just say $100, even though I think it's more. So 100, and if you have 20 yards of mulch or wood chips, say that's you're basically getting a, let's just say, $1,500 to $2,000 delivery of chips, wood chips, mulch that you can just pile high in your garden for weed control. So there's a little tip and trick for you where you don't you don't need to go to your nursery to buy mulch. Wood chips, they smell better than mulch, believe me. If you've I hate the smell of mulch. So if you've gone if you've smelled like some of that black mulch, I almost can't stand it actually. Some people like it. They say it smells fresh, but you haven't smelled fresh until you've smelled like real fresh, freshly ground twigs and grinded stumps dumped right on your lawn. That's fresh. And it's not, there's no chemicals or no dyeing or anything like that. So it might not be as filtered, or it's not as consistent as far as the actual um pieces go. Like mulch, obviously you're going to have a more consistency as far as the size of the mulch itself, but with chip drop, here it's getchipdrop.com, you're getting so much more, and it smells better, and you won't even know the difference. Like once you spread it, it's almost as if you bought it, but it's free. That's the one thing I didn't mention. The arborist doesn't have to pay the $10 to $20 to dump it, and you get 20 yards for free. Now you have to be willing to put in the work to shovel all of that into a wheelbarrow and take it to your locations. Now I have like I said, I have like almost 2 acres, and there's plenty of spots where I can put those wood chips. It's going to look really nice when I do, especially if when I was talking about my friend down in Virginia, some of the wood chips that he used to get were like light colored. Um, they would get a little, like the sun would weather them, but when it rained, it would give the curbside appeal would be enhanced. The rain would make it a different color for a while, and then the smell came out. But I was envious, until I came back up to Pennsylvania and found a bunch of partners up here that do it. And I don't know if they would do it if you're in a different state. I'm on the East Coast. If you're on the West Coast or South or North, I don't know. In Canada, you would probably only get pine, which just smells so good. My friend got pine, a mixture of pine and deciduous, but they put needles in there and everything. It's the weed growth is stopped immediately. Like you can pile it high 6 inches, and you still have plenty of wood chips. So I'm looking forward to spring again. I'm going to probably try to use whatever is left in the pile. Actually, I haven't used anything yet because I told you I'm trying to clean the beds, but can't wait to put it down prior to the winter. So whatever weeds are thinking about coming up when the season turns, maybe they're going to think twice. Maybe they won't be able to. I actually even transplanted some raspberry bushes that were growing in the front of the house, raspberry bushes. So the owners that used to live here they were older, they didn't really clean up very much in the last several years, obviously, but they had raspberries growing, and I actually got probably a good 2 bowls worth of them. Every time I walked by them, coming back into the house, I would just pick a few, wash them, and then put them in yogurt with granola. And free raspberries. That's I had to transplant them because when everything was dug up, it was just a complete and utter mess. So I don't want them in the front of the house anyways. I would rather have them like in a spot that's more conducive to going out there and picking the berries, not when you're walking up your sidewalk. And believe me, raspberry bushes have very, very spiny stems. uh Thousands of little things will stick you, and when I was picking at the raspberries, I actually got sticked quite often. So chip drop, get chipdrop.com, and hopefully that'll help you out a bit.